of not being a family but being a sports team.
I don't believe that tech should define a person's life.
I can hire a lot of executors, which are literally hands-on people who would get dirty, do tasks.
How do you fit your team culture if you don't have someone like a Messi with you?
Hi everyone, welcome to the Synapse Pod. I'm Chirag Kapil. This is Paras, Avinash, Ayush, Manik, and Saransh. All your best Synapse people with you here today. We have some interesting topics to talk about, and a lot has been going on in the world. we all know that. So, like the crypto crash, I think we've quite extensively covered that in our last pod. But today, I thought we'll start off with something very interesting. Companies, in the sense that with all the market crashes happening and a lot of layoffs happening, what do you guys think, to start off with, and I'll keep it light, requires a kind of how should companies approach such a hard time in terms of layoffs with respect to culture or termination, and what kind of a culture would if you were building a company, which many of us are, would suggest, and what would be the key non-negotiables, if we can talk about, which you would definitely put inside your cultural playbook, which would define everything in your role. So, how do you see that happening, Paras? Why don't you?
Okay.
Start.
So, see, if I have to talk about the kind of culture one should build, or I think it's a very personal topic, what kind of cultures you want to build in your company, because mostly cultures are reflection of founders at a lot of times, like how they see the entity operating as a beast in itself. So, if I have to talk about probably the one thing which I have taken from Netflix's work culture, I read a book, No Rules, that was written about their company culture. The one thing which really hit me was, can you inculcate the feeling in your team of not being a family but being a sports team? So a lot of times founders make this aura in the company or this mode in the company that oh, we are a family, we have to stick together, we have to go through thick and thin together, or we have to be best friends, we love each other, this is a family, we'll win the world together. But the problem with this is, a lot of times you can't be honest to family. You can't remove underperformers from the family, which is very important for a company to happen. So a good parallel that a company should look at should probably be a sports team, where just mere playing in the 11 in the sports team is a privilege. And even if you go out of the team, that's completely okay, because that's for the team to win. You have to go out so someone better can come. I think if in the cultures in the companies that I'm building, if I'm able to get everyone on the same page that this is like a sports team, this is not a family, and everyone takes this very positively and eventually feels that just being in the team is a privilege, and even if I have to go out someday, it's good because the team probably will win. Because let's say if Dhoni gets retired and moves out of the Indian team, he's not sad about it, because the team has to now move on to younger players for team to keep winning in the future. So that's very cool, right? So that's probably
That's very cool. That's very cool. What about you guys?
No, absolutely. I'd like to add on that. Paras, I think that's a beautiful analogy of a sports team, because then you have a bigger picture always in mind. You think of something bigger than you, right? One other major thing that I follow, when managing a team, is that I don't like to micromanage at all. I like, what's the point of hiring someone? What's the point of putting someone at a place when you still have to be concerned about each and every move, right? Rather, I want to hire people to take things off my back, and a better person can do it, right? So I'm a big fan of doing like a monthly analysis on things because you have to give people room as well to try out things and come back with failure. So this was amazing. I read and a lot of books actually that how comfortable you are talking about failures. So every week on week, if we are having a meeting and we are comfortable enough among each other to accept that yes we did fail in this, but what did you learn from that failure? Then it becomes very comfortable, right? In a way that you don't shy away from sharing the reality of things. So like monthly analysis, weekly, kind of coming up that what happened, and just giving them the ownership that just do your job, do what you think is right, and then you have to evaluate. But of course, not a family for sure, more like a sports team.
So don't you think so? Like just not so monthly and weekly are one way, but what I've seen in a lot of companies, and we do the same in ours, is we do a lot of daily stand-ups, which keeps the whole team on their toes with respect to what is the task that is to be achieved and what is the progress, because there's an inherent fear that I don't want to say nothing in my tomorrow's stand-up, right? And people would judge me, and it's a public forum. So
I think I will answer this. At least the culture that we are trying to build, if they are doing nothing, there has to be a reason they didn't do it. And if they can justify the reason that, hey, my previous task was left and I still want to complete that, or it's a creative task that needs a little bit more bandwidth, that could be building an ad out, right? Like building a brand guidelines out. It could be any creative task. And necessarily a lot of founders do that, but sometimes founders don't do that, or founders come from a very tech background and need someone else to do a creative task. And it could also happen on the coding, like it could be in different fields when you're thinking of the architecture, and it takes a couple of days to do a particular task, and they say, hey, I'm just following up on my previous task, and that's absolutely fine. Because you don't have to be on their toes at each day asking, because if you're thinking for them, you're not thinking for yourself. I mean, how many decisions can you take in a decision? And if you have a team of say 10 people, can you think for each of them individually what their day will look like? That would be a hell of a task.
So does that mean like you support daily stand-ups? However, just in case people don't have anything to concretely share what they've done the day before, it's fine.
It's not about to check on the day before. We are not teachers. That is based on the OKRs that we follow at least in our company. We look at the OKRs on a weekly basis, what they have achieved. The daily stand-up is to figure out, is there a collaboration that needs to take place? Is there an add-on that someone else can add on and help someone else out? Can things move faster or quicker? Is the reason for a daily stand-up. The daily stand-up is not meant to be done in a manner where it's like, oh, I have to send emails out to my customers. That's not daily stand-up. That's your work. You're going to do your work to achieve a higher NPS if you're in a customer support team.
Yeah.
So daily stand-up is when you figure out what collaboratively you can do, or what's the major task that you want to achieve by doing certain things. It could be repetitive. If a game is being built out, it takes a week to build out a game. You can say, hey, I'm still building the previous game out. I'm still designing the previous levels of the game.
Just for the audience, since the term OKR was mentioned, OKR is Objectives and Key Results. It's a beautiful framework by John Doerr, and you guys can definitely check it out. There's a whole big ass book on it, which essentially gives a team a framework to achieve certain objectives and figure out the hows to do it in a quarterly kind of a framework. But that's something which we also follow. I think it's become more of a standard norm across all VC-backed startups these days. Or
I've personally dropped it.
really,
It is a bit complicated, and everyone has a different recipe of OKRs actually.
It's a
that
bit.
we were talking about that day.
Absolutely.
Go on to one person, one metric, and just let them do it.
so you're
I
talking
think-
about the growth equation kind of.
Yeah, so I'm saying, if, like you just said, growth equation. If company has an objective to achieve, and it can be mathematically represented into an equation of, let's say, X number of variables, then every team member should know what variable in that equation they are,
Yeah.
and they should be only focused on that one variable. This is the ideal state. What we have tried to do recently, I would say in the past 3-4 months, is that make sure that every person knows their metric, and that metric is always relevant. And even in daily stand-ups, they are talking about how can they move towards that metric faster, or have they moved in recent past. anywhere closer to it.
So you are
It
not.
just brings in a lot more context than I think what work has to, at least for art.
So you have shifted to a very micro kind of a way where you are checking daily, but you're not looking at hey, we move this in quarter.
I'm not
we
checking daily, I would say.
But that's like a stand-up, okay?
Yeah.
But, yeah. So you're not
The
giving it a
content.
broad form like 3 mahina, 3 months, or 2 months, or 1 month. Not like that.
I'll probably more focus on what needle are you moving right now? What's your metric?
I want to tell
What
you
do
one
you do?
thing. Like, one thing happened recently with me. So I was interviewing a person and loved that interview. The question that he asked me, he said, "How do you think I will add? How will I grow your company after hiring me?" And this was a question. I don't know where did he pick that up, but that made me pause for a minute. And then I said 3 points that kept on top of my mind of how he's gonna help me grow the company. And that was a fantastic question he asked me. And like adding to that question, I remembered what Paras used to say that always ask yourself, always ask your team, what is stopping you to go from X to 10X?
Yeah.
I think Paras, that thing I tried this week with 2-3 of my employees, it worked like magic. Because then they were telling me those things that were not sharing before.
And
Or maybe,
mindset.
yeah, like maybe they were not thinking about it in that way before, or they knew but they were not comfortable sharing. I don't know what happened, but then they told me few points which were so trivial in their blockage, and it was removed like anything. Like I was like, wow, this happened with the non-moderate thing that I discussed.
There's a very recent thing about culture. Thing about culture that I read recently. There's a difference between people who built PayPal versus people who built or worked in Google. A lot of companies have actually come out of PayPal, but not a lot of companies or successful companies have come out of Google.
Yeah.
Because a person who works in Google shared that after gaining a lot of success suddenly, Google started hiring people at execution level. They started hiring perfect managers instead of thinkers, which were not having brutal conversations about what else to be done, what else can be done, which was not the case with people. People was not hiring managers, they were hiring thinkers, they were hiring disruptors. And that was the kind of a culture that PayPal nurtured, which was missing in Google. So that's why a lot of people we know have gone complacent.
Actually, adding to that, this was again on a podcast that I heard, and there one of the PayPal members said that we could not hire people initially, so we used to hire our friends. And with our friends, we were so open to talk that they used to be like blunt honest about things. So in a way, it helped because there was no inhibitions of what to say, what not to say, and that worked for them. Plus, they could see success in front of them, and that led them to make their own companies in the future.
I mean, I don't believe that a metric should define a person's life in a company, because then you'll again keep hiring good managers.
Yeah.
You'll end up having good managers and not good thinkers.
Yeah.
Which
I
is
don't think that it's like it's spanned out very horizontally. Like I can hire a lot of executors, which are literally hands-on people who would get dirty, do tasks, and complete their shit. Versus I can hire managers who would manage these executors and make sure that the supply lines run on time. And in both of them, I can add the top sprinkle of thinking, right? Which is essentially the cultural mix. That I build a culture in which thinking is promoted and not inhibited, where people have the opportunity to speak up their mind, and have the opportunity to collaborate, and irrespective of the designation or the ranking in the hierarchy of a company, they can put in ideas, and that's where the yes and kind of an attitude comes in, where when you're ideating, adding to other people's thoughts and
Building on top of
processes.
it.
I just don't know, and that's a question for all of you. If I would just get thinkers or academicians, how would that kind of a culture pan out? Is something which is
So I have to build on Ayush was stating. In my opinion, like the culture, I strongly feel that the culture of a company also kind of evolves along with the journey that the company is taking. That's one thing. Second is obviously it also largely depends on the industry in which the company is operating, right? So I think most of us, because we are specifically inclined towards IT companies or working in tech companies, so that's where our vision of a culture comes from. And even in a tech company, any tech company, the journey, right? At the start, let's say when the person is starting, any culture kind of also depends on the kind of people you are hiring, right? And at different journey points in the company's lifespan, you need different kind of skill sets from the people that will help you grow from there to the next step. So in the initial phases, I think the culture has to be something of where some things will obviously remain as as a constant. Like in initial phases, what will come in as is people who are very hardworking. So you have to value people who are putting in more time and effort with you, are acting as loyalists with you. You will have to give them the freedom to make mistakes, execute 0 to 1 with you, and you will have to have a culture where you have their hand on their back that hey, no matter whatever happens, whether the results come out or not, I'm standing by your side, right? So that is the culture with which it starts. Now, once you let's say move progress and you raise some money, right? At that point in time, you have the ability to hire smarter people, right? But there are people in the company who have already gained a lot of experience implementing different things, and now you're getting outside folks, but who have more knowledge into specific domains in which they will be operating. So at that point in time, your culture has to be such that it can incorporate difference in opinions and it can value different opinions at the same time. As you move further, right, that is where the point comes in, where let's say a Google kind of picture comes in, where you will rather need people who can make maximum use of the leverage that they have in hand. Because when you have cash in hand in bank, when you have people right available to you, then you need the kind of people who can make use of those leverage, and then you need people who can set out processes, right? So the culture of the company also needs to move in a direction where you value at that point in time processes being set up, how the inter-department communications, how can they be streamlined. Obviously, there will be some cores in the culture that will always remain. Like for example, if I was to set up a company, I would always value freedom of thought for different, like you were mentioning, right? Yeah. Everyone should have a free thought, should be allowed to kind of speak their mind. And that is how people also evolve. Once they speak their mind, you debate with them about the ideas, they also evolve in their personal growth journey, right? So few things remain constant, some I believe will vary as the company also progresses.
Saraj, I have a question on that to him. You said that the people who are initially in the core team, they might not grow as fast as the company grew, right? And when the company is at the stage when they hire experts or domain experts, they tend to be more smarter than the people who are already there.
Absolutely.
So at that stage, and this same happens with the company's founder as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes the CEO has to be replaced because he's not apt for the team.
Yeah.
So in that way, should we be valuing those people who put in their heart and soul, or should we follow the Paras strategy of a team and what's right for the team at that point of time?
Simply what Paras suggested, right? So the end goal has to be that the company has to move from 1 to 2. Now you have to realize what are the strength of the current people who are on the org, which people are fitting into that structure of taking you from 1 to 2. If you feel that someone's skills have expired and they won't be able to mature to take the company from 1 to 2, you have to.
Actually, I've realized that I think it's either the company who outgrow people or the people who outgrow company.
Absolutely.
So most of the employees actually stay for 18 months in a company. That's 18 to 24 months. So you have to make sure that the company's growth and their growth at that point of time is the same. And if it's not the same, you have to fire fast. Hire fast and fire fast is something which, as a tech entrepreneur, you have to look at. But realize that how it's important. But coming back to the culture point, I think I will add to what Paras said, because this is an article which I wrote back in 2016. And I think this is my only article which I've written on LinkedIn. It's about the fact that I was inspired that day from I support Liverpool and all my friends know it. But You Will Never Walk Alone is the anthem, right? And how you kind of work in that team environment, and that got inspired over the period of time. I'm going to relate Bill Campbell's story, and I can relate with what we have. Most of the team, if you relate with the football club, and let me explain, don't have a Messi or a Ronaldo. If you have a Messi or a Ronaldo who can, over the past 10 years can score like 50 goals every season, then you have got something extremely special and you build teams around them. But even then they start to age and you have to manage their time and how they're going to play and how everything else is happening. Otherwise, you're going to have pieces in the cogs who will perform the right way. They are smart enough to understand how it functions and how it works. And they can change the piece as and when it moves. And that's the reason why, our current manager, Jurgen Klopp, the reason I kind of liked him from the Dortmund days is the way he kind of moved his pieces around with the plots. And how do you get that best out of each person you play with? And it's happened so many times, and I can still say that it happens with us, that almost any player who leaves Liverpool or any player who left Dortmund, other than Lewandowski being an exception, everyone who left did never perform to the levels which at Dortmund they performed. Because it was the team that was performing and not that individual player.
Yeah.
The individual was not above the team. So it was about the team and the way they played that it mattered that how he played. He moved out of the system. I think Shinji Kagawa moved to United under Sir Alex Ferguson. He didn't perform well. There was Nuri Sahin who moved to Real Madrid, went back, couldn't perform well. Ozil went to Bayern, again couldn't perform well. It's been more and more. And then we had the same with us. Coutinho went to Barcelona, didn't perform well. We had Wijnaldum who went to PSG, couldn't perform well. It's basically how do you fit your team culture if you don't have someone like a Messi with you?
Yeah, this gives me lots of thoughts on game theory and John Nash. But what I also understand is not only a team culture, unless you give your individual employees or sportsmen a directional autonomy. And when I say directional autonomy, I do not mean an autonomy which is not guarded from outside or haywire. I mean a very
Should align with
targeted,
the vision.
That's a
absolutely
beautiful word.
very targeted directional autonomy to a person with respect to the kind of goals of the organization, the goals of the founders, and giving them the full freedom to operate inside a certain area where they are able to creatively think and create magic, right? And of course, you give enough time and have enough patience as a founder where you are able to see those results and run frugally, of course, before you are able to scale up. So I feel that is also a very, very important aspect, and that is something which I hold very core to my own belief of directional autonomy for all my employees.
That's cool.
Absolutely. That's quite fair.
So, perfect. Any other points, anyone, with respect to culture addition? Anything about cost? How would you cut down costs of your team? Would you give the similar autonomy to your employees with respect to spending, burn, managing their own financing, treating them like adults or like children who you're giving pocket money to every single month with respect to departmental budgets? How would you look at that?
We recently hired an intern. I tell this was an anecdote. A 19-year-old intern. His work is to do partnerships with influencers, and he's probably second or third day into the internship. I told him you have a budget of $1,500. Now these are your casino chips. You have to play the casino chips. If you go to a casino with casino chips and you don't play, you'll come back with the same money, but what's the point? The fun is in playing the casino chips to a point where you maximize your returns by playing.
Yeah.
Right? As at least $1,500 are your casino chips. Use them wisely, use them frugally, but use them. And then move towards your metric faster. The intern who's 19-year-old is of course super duper intimidated about it because he's on a stipend probably 3 times the rupee value of that 1,500 that we are talking about. Very nominal stipend he's at. And suddenly he's given a budget of $1,500 which triggers a lot of emotions I think in him. And has a rough start, 3-4 days, but then takes some feedback from me and around 20th day of the month or so, he's not utilized the entire 1,500, surpassed the metric. Now, he's aced the game. Now, this might not happen every time. Like, this might be beginner's luck also. But what I realized in the whole exercise is that people do become adults once you start treating them like adults. You don't have to be an adult to be treated like an adult. I'm saying treat like an adult and the person will become an adult. Right? So I think that's what worked out really well very recently. So.
Yeah, even for kids. If you treat them like adults, they respond in that manner. If you coddle them, they don't. So it depends on how you treat them, is the way they will speak with you. If you start treating most of the kids you meet as adults, they will speak with you for hours because they feel respected and their voices being heard.
I kind of really took up one point from you, which is primarily that you gave him a budget, right? You gave him an outer limit that is of his expense. I think as humans, when we think about cost, right, we are able to plan it better when we have given a fixed limit to it.
Fixed resources.
If we think that it's an unlimited kind of a tap and I'm not given any limit, then we would go on probably spend on things and not even kind of consider what we are spending on or keep in the back of the mind how the burn is happening, right? But if we have a upper margin that this is what we have to operate in, then is when you kind of go and then you start thinking whether this is the best, like you said in casino, right? Is this the best bet that I would want to place with my money at this stage? So depending on the level of the person in the company, you have to take that call whether you want to give that person a budget, whether you want to give that person the flexibility to you think that they can think through and kind of use it to the best of the company's use case. So I think that is how I would preferably kind of have a look at that.
I think not only that, like, as soon as you give a certain kind of a budget, right, you need from the management or their manager or the leader very candor fed feedback system where you're doing things, you're experimenting, you have that autonomy, but you know that there is a hand on your back who will show you the right direction as soon as you move a little haywire. I think that candid feedback without the fear of talking to your manager is the most important. Because as soon as people start to fear their manager, they will not spend. They will. The whole dynamic shifts, right? You're not thinking about the company, you're thinking about your own ass saving. As soon as the whole company or majority of the company shifts to that kind of an attitude, suddenly progress goes out of the box. Then everyone is just trying to do progress to save their own ass. They're not doing progress for the company.
So my question is that, like, this giving budget to a certain department or a certain person, how scalable is that as you grow? Because right now there are, in any early stage startup, there are a couple of things that you can do. That's why you have limited amount of money, and then you can set budgets. Because you know this thing can be done in a certain budget. When you scale, maybe you don't know what can be achieved in a certain budget. Right? For example, it was a very classic case that when Walt Disney went to Disney to start a theme park, they gave him a budget of $100,000, which required much more than that, because he believed in the vision, he believed it could work. Then he took a loan from his own, started, and we know where Disney is. Right? I mean, when the company grows, then I think this budgeting system is flawed.
So what you just said, right? Walt Disney creating Disney World, that was a 0-1 moonshot. I'm sure there would be some kind of an allocation between the founders or the board for 0-1 moonshots. Hey, we'll allocate this amount of $1 million to it, and then
Generally
let
not there.
founders run.
Not much. I doubt ever they have values.
My thing I wish, like, I mean, that's one anecdote. But on the other hand, let's say if you look at an Ogilvy ad, rarely I've seen an Ogilvy ad, an award-winning ad, which would have costed a lot of money to create. A lot of times, I say this, that the second best things in the world are most expensive ones because the best ones are for free. So it's not really important that every time money is the answer to.
I agree, but if you're talking about a Ogilvy ad, what if creativity also doesn't have a price?
It doesn't have a price.
Correct. So then you cannot have a price tag to creativity, like make me an award-winning.
No, you can't. It has taken people with a budget of $1 million, not the ad creation and production of
correct. Exactly.
$1 million.
I think a lot of companies, kind of even the big company like Stripe, right? They still operate with these constraints of budgets for different teams, right? I'll tell you how that helps them. So I was listening to Shreyas Doshi, who kind of heads product. He used to head kind of product for Stripe, right? And what he was bringing is that for every company, right? If at every team's level you can achieve the goal of maximizing the ROI, that is when you kind of are performing to your best ability for the company, right? The objective here is that you have to pick up the best set of projects and in that particular quarter or in that particular annual year. So for everything that you're picking up, you need, if you can plan out a budget that really kind of helps them move in a particular maximizing ROI kind of a definition.
Yeah, I mean, so on this, the problem is when you align the whole company or the whole department and every person terms of ROI, then suddenly you stop taking risky bets.
Yeah.
So
So
which can go to zero.
I agree. So just to complete that, please, they have a framework of, let's say, 60% goes to the BAU, 30% is what they call, as you said, like something innovative that you think would be out of box, and 10% is technical debts or something, right? So improving so you bifurcate the cost in that way, but that so that every quarter you are forced to spend at least that much in each domain. But there is still a capping. That's how they are operating. I'm not sure how much creativity is coming out of their
It's
company.
actually very important to also look at in the, let's say, above $100 million kind of startups, on what amount of money have they allocated for innovation. Because, as they say, if you don't innovate, innovation will kill you, right? Someone else's. So, and we all know the Kodak story, how Instagram literally took everything away from Kodak.
We should actually call a couple of these.
Every time I listen to this example, I think no matter how much R&D budget Kodak would have allocated, they would have not been
Exactly,
Instagram.
because
they were going
they were never disrupting their own industry,
Yeah.
and they were improving the cameras.
allocating R&D
Still
budget would probably
are.
let them think of
Exactly.
an app. Probably a better culture would have.
And by the way, not Instagram.
Okay.
Because Canon was the first digital cameras that came across, right?
So it just makes sense to me, right? When founders are very young, right, and the company is small, founders are creating disruptions for the industry. Now founders have, and the company has grown to, let's say, 100 million plus scale, 500 million plus scale. Now that is a juggernaut. Like, that's a mammoth. They need internal teams to kill their own innovation, and that is exactly what other founders would be doing outside if they want to make the particular company obsolete.
But in this, I really think if there is a moonshot team, if there is a 0 to 1 team internally inside a bigger company, just move them out of that company, keep them in a different space.
Yeah.
Because I know for sure that a company handling BA cannot do 0 to 1.
Cannot.
Why
Creativity
does
does not.
Swiggy is running and they want to start off something like Swiggy Genie or Swiggy Labs, right? So like those things happen, right? So then I know for Walmart, like Walmart has Walmart Labs for specific experiments. So similarly, two companies are created within companies or which run on separate different kind of a culture, which hire those kind of people which will be different from your core set of people in the organization. So that does happen. Not sure what is the kind of China wall that exists.
I mean, I know for Walmart, I don't know for Swiggy, so I can't say it for it. But for Walmart, I know for a fact that Walmart Labs is in a different building than Walmart. I know for a fact that Google X, which was the Larry Page's bedtime project, right? Like he was the one who was creating new things.
Even Alibaba and that B2C company that Jack Ma created, they were done in two different buildings. Taobao. Alibaba and Taobao were created separately. Alibaba employees didn't even know about Taobao. Because B2B and B2C are different culture altogether. It's like Bata and Hush Puppies having different stores altogether. Right?
Tata Motors and Jaguar.
I think different buildings.
Yeah.
Different buildings is just a manifestation of different cultures.
Different
Right?
cultures.
You need space. You cannot run a 0 to 1 with a BAU mindset, and you cannot run BAU with a 0 to 1 mindset. It is absolutely so. Founders who are implementing multiple similar ideologies across their organization for different stages of business, it may not work out.
It's crazy for a founder though, they have to keep switching context.
Yeah.
On both sides.
Yeah.
It's very difficult.
That's why maybe that's the reason why a lot of companies getting acquired by Google dies, because they're in the same campus, they're part of this, they're trying to force fit themselves into the same culture.
Yeah.
Which
Actually, that is another thing. A lot of companies which get acquired don't really perform. Like I know for a fact, the reason being is the fact that, as you said, the culture mismatches happen. I think a lot of time people don't realize how much culture matching is extremely important for the founders and the teams to grow and foster, and how quickly can they help and build things up.
Yeah, I would go back again to the kind of stage a particular initiative is in your org, right? If let's say if an initiative is at a certain stage, and then I would look at other initiatives who are at that similar stage and what kind of a culture they have, and then try to cohesively merge, rather than there cannot be a vertical height difference and cultural matching. it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, correct.
I have no idea how. I have no idea how Elon Musk is switching context in that place. Then
No, he
I think
said,
Elon Musk is a different.
No, he said he's an
He's an alien. Yeah, he's an alien, and it's a different conversation to be had.
Perfect. So I think that is it for today.
Yeah.
It was
Keeping
a good
it short.
podcast. Keeping it short and sweet, sir.
As you guys asked for it.
Yes, for it. Okay.
Couple of them.
Okay, you were saying viewers are for it.
Perfect. So we'll see all of you guys next week in the next pod. Thank you so much. Check in.